here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church. Yeah, just have to speak up, I suppose. We do allow for questions following the service, morning sermon. Anything not clear? Or something you want to talk about more? We have the first question. Yes.
I was thinking of the passage that Hebrews talks about entering into a rest. And I have some friends that would use that passage and talk about it almost to kind of say the opposite of what you were saying as far as us, that we should be in a race and we should be working hard and intense. Can you clarify what that rest means in Hebrews?
Sure, yeah. Be glad to address that. Interesting thing about the Ten Commandments, all of them are explicitly repeated in the New Testament, except for one. Can you guess which one that is? That's the Sabbath. It's addressed. It's just not explicitly repeated, not in the same way. And what I believe that means is, when it talks about the rest, I believe that's an actual process. And as the world turns to Christ over time, we gain the rest. But we do not gain that rest without all kinds of struggles in the meantime. And it's interesting to me. Is that working there? Hold on. It's working. Okay. All right. I'll just have to speak up. You guys have you guys have a microphone. I don't, but hasn't hurt me before. Thank you. That rest, I believe, is happening in Hebrews, is a rest that is becoming over time. In other words, think for example of our lives right now. I'll just give this quick example right now. How many food options that are affordable that you can take advantage of exist? Let's say within a 5-mile radius, say 2.5 miles this way, 2.5, a 5-mile radius. Okay, we'll go 5. How many food options exist within that 5-mile radius of this spot? I'm going to guess. 50? I'm thinking 100. Hundreds. Especially if you want to count like vending machines, roadside stands, drive-in groceries. They're all over the place. Have you ever had a chance to read of just the normal lives of people living, let's say even in Europe, as it was becoming Christianized, even 500, 600, 700 years ago? You ever read much about their lives? You know what you can't read much about when they're talking about food. They talk about food all the time. It was a desperate struggle for them. Now we talk about food. Most of the time we talk about food, we're talking about a hobby, right? It's a big hobby. Yeah, I like cooking, Japanese food with certain type of oil, and I like to cook it over cherry wood because it gives it a special flavor. How many people, years ago couldn't even think about cherry wood unless they're extremely wealthy? Our lives have become restful, I believe that's what that's talking about, because of the expansion and the blessings of the gospel. And as the gospel expands, it blesses more and we have rest. But if we're going to expand the gospel, it's going to come at a cost. As Paul knew. And Paul was one, and there have been many others who expanded the gospel so that we could receive that blessing of rest. That's how I understand that. That's helpful.
You mentioned there's no one banging at our door here or potentially coming in. Do you think that's because the church has become irrelevant in our culture today? And if so, what do we do?
Well, if I swing and miss this one, I should be thrown out of here. Has the church become irrelevant? You know, we now have the biggest, I would say, the biggest illustration of that this weekend. Have you seen the different denominations that are getting behind this Pope? I'm like, hey, I get the Roman Catholics. You're not even Roman Catholic. What are you doing? One of the most horrific examples in Scripture of irrelevance is that passage in Matthew 5. You know where I'm going, right? If the salt has lost its savor, it's good for nothing but to be cast out and be trodden underfoot of men. And again, I know we've mentioned this before, but Christ didn't stop with saying that if the salt has lost its savor, it's good for nothing. That would have been good enough, but he had to add, it's good for nothing but to be cast out and be trodden underfoot of men. And if the church is irrelevant and being trodden underfoot, it's because we've lost our savor. You know, the early church was persecuted, horribly persecuted. If you want to get some perspective at some point, read about the 7 major persecutions of the early church. Horrific, unbelievable stuff. Great courage. Some were killed quickly, some were not. Lions eating people don't always. The lions, let's just say the lions didn't always kill their victims first. Let's just put it that way. They put up with all kinds of great difficulties. One young man, this is in Fox's Book of Martyrs. His name was Victor. Great name for this young man. He was told to bow down to a statue of Isis. Now, the Romans, later on, you had to, sacrifice to Genus, the emperor, which means his godhood. Prior to that, there was a sort of a transition period where they went away from some goddesses. One of them was Isis. She was an Egyptian goddess. And Victor was told to sacrifice to pay homage to Isis. And of course, all he had to do was bow down to an image of Isis. How many of you know the story of Fox's Book of Martyrs? Some of you do. Okay. You don't count. For my kids. Well, Victor refused. So he's horribly beaten. And to the point where he could barely walk. He had one good leg, one bad leg. And after they thought Victor had wised up, they said, hey, will you now pay homage to our goddess? And he asked to see the goddess once again. And they, apparently thinking that he had wised up in his misery, brought him in front of the statue. And he was leaning on 2 people supporting him because he couldn't walk. And he asked to be brought near to the idol. I'm sure we didn't call it an idol. He asked to be brought closer. And so they did, thinking they'd won some victory here. And Victor, do you not want to talk to Victor? Victor got close enough, and with his good leg, he reached out and kicked the pedestal so that Isis fell down and broke. Well, what a great guy. What a guy. They were so angry at him, they thought they'd won, but they quickly threw him into a mill and killed him right away. Stories like this again and again throughout the early church, they're just frankly all over the place. And I remember reading one writer who said, you know what? We have no problems because we are no problem. Our society and culture is headed to hell as fast as it can go. And are we any kind of impediment at all? Are we greasing the skids, making it easier, just so we can be liked by the people who are on their way there? So your question is, what do we do? Always that question. A couple things. God talks about destruction for lack of knowledge, does he not? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's a broad word, destroyed because you don't know things. We saw that happen, of course, in the Old Testament. The destruction of the northern kingdom. They found God's law in Josiah's revival. Otherwise, they'd have been out before they were. That gave them knowledge about what they were supposed to do. in terms of that knowledge, though, the rest of that verse, we all know where it says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And then God goes on to say, because you've rejected me, I will reject you from being my priests. Now what does that mean? Well, the priests of that time were those who represented God to the people. If the Church of Jesus Christ, that names his name, cannot represent Christ, then we are that savorless salt. So in terms of what we do, I'm arguing today, asking, begging, pleading, saying, telling, whatever, that every one of us here, we need to be that representative of Christ wherever we can. Wherever we find ourselves. And you folks here have opportunities that I'll never have because you're in a different place than I am, where you work differently from me, you know different people than I know. At a minimum, we need to represent Christ wherever and to whomever that we possibly can. We have so many churches. I've heard that there's 500 churches in Harrisburg alone. That seems like a high number. It seems like a lot. In Harrisburg? There's about 2 or 3 in Churchtown. I guess that's why it's named Churchtown. Right down the road here. But what would happen? What would happen if all church members, even half, even 5% truly, would be willing to be hated by the world and to be loved by Christ and represent his law and his authority and his name here on this earth? What would happen? What would it look like? I don't really know. I sure would love to see it, because we're not seeing it now. And our new definition of being a good Christian is that the worldly people who hate Christ don't hate us. That's our definition nowadays of being a good Christian, my friends. I hate saying it, but that's the standard. If you are not hated, if you are hated by the world, that means you're a bad Christian. And if you're accepted by the world and get invited to their mayor's prayer breakfast, now you're a good Christian. What a disaster. John the Baptist would have something to say to us, I'm afraid. Difficult things to say here.
I just want to make a comment. The church may be irrelevant, but those who are running the race, for example, Dr. Kent Hovind, who has done tremendous damage to the powers of darkness on the college campuses, and even just opening the eyes of Christians all across the country by speaking the truth. They're not irrelevant, and they are being persecuted horribly. So you get in the race, but in this world you will have tribulation. I mean, you will be pretty well beaten up, either personally or by the powers that be. But you'll be blessed for it. So.
One of the things that we have to understand, of course, is that God is a long-term God. He's not an instant. He's not a soundbite God. And his program goes on over generations and generations. For example, the Second Commandment, showing mercy to thousands of generations. It doesn't say that in the Second Commandment, it says it later on in Deuteronomy. Thousands of generations, those who love me and keep my commandments. But he says earlier there that he will visit iniquity to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate him. So this is a long-term God we're talking about here. At one point, God said to Samuel that he'll have war with Amalek from generation to generation. There's not just one and done. Generation to generation, war with Amalek? Yeah. And to give a quick example here, we see tremendous things going on in China right now, tremendous things going on in India, things that we would never have guessed. Of all the people that have suffered at the hand of Islam, the worst, it's not the Christians. It's probably the Hindus around the year 1000 AD. As much as the Christians have suffered, the Hindus have actually suffered worse. It's unbelievable if you read about it. I remember reading and studying in school about the Hindu Kush. I don't know what the Kush was. It was just a name, the Hindu Kush. I found out later that that word means slaughter. This is the area of India that they now call the Hindu slaughter, because so many Hindus lost their lives. That was so many years ago. And now we see, and I believe it's going to happen, my friends. I believe we're about a generation away from seeing at least northern India look like China. God's at work. We have callings here that we must not abandon. But He will work, and He has worked. The fact that Africa is where it is today as far as Christ is concerned, unbelievable. You wouldn't have believed it 200 years ago. Same way with what's happening in India, especially China, as we talked about before. China, just 100 years ago, kicked out all the Christian missionaries. Or maybe 115 years ago, kicked them out, none left. And now the conservative numbers in China are 200 million believers. That's a conservative number. There may be as many believers in China as there are people in the United States of America. And they just kicked the missionaries out 100 plus years ago. God's at work. We know He's going to get them what He's going to do. That's really not our worry. Our worry is our race is set in front of us. I trust we'll finish it like victor. Strong.
Yeah, one comment about Victor, they actually sawed his leg off that he used.
I forgot about
And then
that.
they threw him in the middle.
Oh, okay.
But I had a question about Paul when he was talking about, I discipline my body to bring it under submission. What does that mean? Is that like some metaphor? Was he like, was he nutritious? You know, did he exercise? Like that kind of thing. I'm just kind of curious as to what you thought about that.
Yeah, I want to, nice, thank you. I want to talk about that more next week. I believe he's talking about more than just his body, than just himself. I think he's talking about his entire lifestyle. That he eliminates certain things that he could probably lawfully do. Remember, he's talking in the context here about keeping certain things away from him so that he can minister the gospel. It's in the context of eating meat offered to idols, of course. And so I think he's not just talking about himself, he's talking about perhaps people he could see, places he could go. Who knows, maybe even vacations he could take or whatever. I think he's talking about all of that. So I think he's talking about himself personally, yes, but I think he's talking way beyond that. We're going to address that a little bit more next week, because I believe the definition of what he's actually doing is in the next chapter. If you read chapter 10, Paul is going to talk about certain things that we're not supposed to do. He used a lot of negatives in chapter 10. I think those negatives apply to what he's doing in that verse. So we'll see, I trust, next week somewhat, but even more than next week, about what he's talking about. So you'll see those negatives, stuff we're not supposed to do, and he uses as an example the children of Israel. So I think that's what he's doing, using that example to apply to himself and urge the urge the congregants as well. I don't think he's talking about eating sugar or although that could be a problem, because he's going to address that. I'll tip my hand here a little bit. He does address the eating thing. He addresses the quail that they wanted. So it could be that, but it's not just that.
Did you see the article about either a congressman or a senator that like snuck the water that the Pope was drinking?
No,
See
it's,
that? Anyone see that?
It was
Yeah.
Brady.
Yeah, apparently.
He's from New Jersey. He's
Apparently,
from New Jersey?
No, I think Philadelphia, isn't it Brady, wasn't it Brady?
Oh, was it Brady?
I
All
yeah,
right.
they had pictures of him. Apparently, he felt he needed
A drink.
a drink of holy water, or of water that the Pope was drinking. I don't even know.
And all of his office staff, all of
And
his
he
staff and
sprinkled it on
everybody.
his staff and his family. Thought nobody was looking. And it's funny, but it's alarming. That's our congressman, or our senator, I don't know who it was. One of our leadership, one of our men of leadership, and he, to look at him, he was in this, he looked mature on the outside, but why would a guy like that, one, feel he needed to do that, two, have to do it under the cover, that lady got exposed, but that frightens me, to be honest with you. That's the people running our nation.
Well, I would argue what you're seeing there is a return to superstition happening right under your nose. In this secularized world where we only believe science and all that kind of stuff, once you take God out, you will go back to idols, you will go back to superstition. You're not going to stay in this vacuum of quote-unquote atheism forever. I just read this week that over half of Americans, I can hardly believe this, now believe in aliens. That's predictable. That is predictable. You're going to kick out God. There's something going to go into that vacuum, and it's going to be idolatry and superstition. And we're watching that progression go on in this country. It's our job to speak up about it. An interesting thing too is that I saw a Roman Catholic on Facebook. I've never seen this before. Never. Roman Catholics are big on their Pope. Don't mess with their Pope. The Roman Catholic said, "I'm Roman Catholic," and he didn't say Roman Catholic. He said, "I'm Catholic, and this is not my Pope." I've never seen that before. So if maybe, we've always argued, we talk about Roman Catholics and we say, well, some of them are Christians, and we twist ourselves up in knots over that. Who knows, maybe by the time this guy's done, the true Roman Catholics will be out of there. Maybe a good thing. Did I say the true Roman Catholic, true Christians? True Christians.
So in Matthew and Mark, the Gospels have an account of Jesus being taken by Judas Iscariot, his crowd, and then the disciples fled. And then in John, when Jesus rose from the tomb, and then some of the disciples heard about it, the one disciple, which I think was John, and then Peter, they were running to the tomb. So I'm wondering if who ran harder, when they fled or when they were running to the tomb? Were they motivated more by fear or by desire?
Don't know. I think in both cases they were running desperately at a minimum. In both cases. The reason why I say even when they ran to the tomb is because as the other disciple did outrun Peter. So you only talk about someone outrunning someone else when you're giving it your best effort. If I was running one of those 5Ks, the way I run, I wouldn't talk about somebody outrunning me. They say, well, it's faster or whatever, but not outrunning. So I'm sure they're definitely running. But it is interesting that it does say run. They didn't walk. It must have been a time, at a certain point, it says they didn't believe the women, but there came a point when they did. And when they did, they took off running. We have time for one more question.
On the topic of rest, the way you argue, you seem to be talking about propositional truth, orthodoxy and orthopraxy, and how to sort it. And whether rest extends to your culture, long-term, generationally, that seems to be a premise you're pushing. Is that true?
Keep going. I'm not going to agree to that.
Okay, there's a guy, all right.
Too early to agree to that.
There's a guy from Denver Seminary who says that we've been taught wrong. That there's a third piece. The problem in our culture, there's a third piece called I'm saying it wrong. Like orthodoxy, great idea, orthopraxy, great practice, that there's a third ortho You ever heard of that?
I've not.
So you can't debunk it, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, to address that, I'll admit that I've not heard of that.
Okay.
Just to address the topic of rest, though, the seventh day or the Sabbath rest is a topic that Scripture addresses often. Often. The difficulty that I find with it is that we seem to constantly get into some kind of a man-made idea of what rest is. I know a family, for example, that they were, and I grew up in that context. I think I've mentioned before, we did not enjoy Sundays. We weren't allowed to do anything. We didn't enjoy it. And my father would quote to us, from Isaiah, you're supposed to make my day a delight. And as kids, we couldn't understand that delight. What do you mean? We're just not allowed to do anything. It wasn't fun. Well, what were we missing? Well, partly, I would argue what we're missing is that things that were once work are no longer work, and these are because of the blessings of the gospel. Is it really all that much work? Would you consider it work, honestly now, to get out the door, take your key, right, put it into the ignition of your car, and expend all that effort to turn it on, and then the rest of the time you're working your arms and legs? You call that work? It's not work anymore. It was work, but it's not. So we have a lot of challenges about this. I believe the Bible is very clear on resting one day in 7. But I believe we get ourselves in all kinds of trouble when we decide for everybody else what that rest is supposed to be. That's where it seems to me we get ourselves in a little bit of trouble. We can't ignore it, though. Those are the two problems we have. If we ignore it, it's like everything else. I don't think we can do that. On the other hand, we can't be defining for everyone else what they're supposed to be doing. That is a topic that's come up before at the Independence Reformed Bible Church. That will come up again. It's just not the easiest topic in the world. I want to thank you all for your kind attention here. We've gone pretty late.